So hey guys, this is your favorite the fictional vortex. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto become the king of all ghosts. But before we start, remember to subscribe and like this video. Now let's start. Please, don't die. Hold on just a little longer. We're almost to the village. No, please, Kami-sama, don't take him away from us yet. Naruto. Slitted red eyes snapped open, their owner quickly sitting up and panting heavily. He lifted a shaking, glowing clawed hand to rest atop his face as his breaths evened out. Silver and golden-tipped fox ears were back against his head in distress as the black silk sheet stuck to his sweaty and toned shirtless torso. That dream again, he muttered in a naturally husky tone. Nay, as he removed his hand and his golden, spiky, shoulder-length hair fell to cover his face. It had been years since he had a dream about his death, years since he last felt the effects of it as well. He felt empty and cold, even if his body temperature was on fire because of his spirit type. Even if not having the restrictions of the body felt like a weight was lifted from your shoulders, you feel like you're missing something. Always having the feeling that you left something behind. He hadn't had a pleasant death, and that could have something to do with the blank feeling, the lack of life. He was alive during the time when the lands weren't yet split. It was during some of the first civilizations of man, when the earth had a single continent with islands branching off near it. The continent was called the Elemental Nations and was filled with samurai, shinobi and demons. The Elemental Nations were divided into countries that were each ruled by a daimyo, or, in other languages, a king. The daimyos, however, didn't always make trips to every individual village, so councils were established in the major ones. However, the councils had to run by the daimyo when any major decisions came up. All was normal until a man called the Sage of Six Paths appeared with ringed eyes and abilities surpassing the normal human mind. He was the discoverer of chakra, the first Jinchuriki, defeat of the world's most evil and dangerous demon, the Jubi. This man taught the people how to use chakra and jutsu, training them to surpass human limits. These people became known as shinobi or ninja, and established their own villages with cages as their dictators. Samurai, however, stuck to the way of the sword, not accepting chakra as part of their honor code. When the sage was nearing death, he knew that the Jubi would once again be free. Thus, to limit the damage of the demon, he sealed away the Jubi's body into the moon and split it into 9 demons, from the Ikibi, 1 tail, to the Kyubi, 9 tails. These 9 were soon called the Biju. For a while, all was well. Ninjas followed their cages like it was a religion, and the councils were merely a suggestion branch, not having any real power besides influence. Soon, however, the councils had become arrogant in their power, addicted to it, and found ways to step around the daimyos and cages without him knowing. Civilians always tried to surpass the cage, or dictator of the village. They were forgetting that the ones truly in power were the daimyos and the cages, to indulge themselves in the sinful feeling of being in charge, wealth, and power. Konohagakure no Sato, the village hidden in the leaves, Konoha for short, was one of the worst. Konoha had fought in multiple wars and never lost, gaining the title of the most powerful ninja village around. This caused them to seek more power to stay on top, to stay the world leaders and look down on the others. The people had started searching for ways to make them more powerful. Remembering what the Sage of Six Paths had done, they started to search for ways to seal the Biju inside of humans. After many failed attempts and deaths, they finally discovered a way, sealing them into newborn babies. He was one of them, the Jinchuriki of the Kyubi. His name was Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. He was the son of Kushina Uzumaki and Minato Namikaze, the 4th Hokage, the 1who sealed the Kyubi inside of him at the cost of his own life while his mother died in childbirth. The one who was kind enough to ask that he be seen as a hero and not the demon, no one listened. At first he was called Naruto Uzumaki. The 3rd Hokage, who had once again taken up his position, kept his real identity a secret from everyone, even the boy himself. Like all Jinchurikis, he was beaten daily, scorned, spat upon, glared at when he took a walk, and tortured on his birthday. He had more assassinations on him as a child than a daimyo had, and was kicked out of the orphanage at the age of 3 and lived in his own apartment. The guards wouldn't do their job and it was burnt down and raided many times. He had grown up with the dream to become Hokage and earn the respect of everyone. At first no one would bother teaching him, and as such he became the Dobi, dead last, of the generation. However, as time progressed, and with teachers like Jiraiya of the Sannin training him, Naruto grad. Yu ally grew stronger and stronger every day. Sasuke, a boy on his team, had become traitor to learn from Orochimaru, and the rescue mission resulted in a failure. Soon Sasuke was taken over by darkness, and the need to kill his brother for killing his clan. Nothing else mattered in his eyes, nothing. Rescue mission came and went, every one of them failures, and hope was diminishing. Naruto had left for 2.5 years with Jiraiya to train and came back stronger and wiser. However, the rescues still resulted in failures. He gained another reason to get strong over time, the Akatsuki. It was an organization that consisted of S-rank missing nin, Sasuke's older brother Itachi included, that hunted down Jinchuriki like animals and sucked the biju from them. The problem with this, however, was that the container died. As time went on, Jiraiya was killed, Sasuke killed Itachi and Orochimaru, the Akatsuki members were being killed off, and all the biju were collected besides 2. Naruto found out that Kyuubi was actually being controlled to attack the village by a man that was thought to be dead years ago, Madara Uchiha, co-founder of Konohagakure no Sato, leader of the Akatsuki. Chair training with the Toad Summons in the Sage Arts, he had defeated Pain, the figurehead leader of the Akatsuki, and gained the respect of the villagers. When he was 17, the Fourth Shinobi War was imminent in the air, and Killer Bee Jinchuriki to the Hachibi, the Eight Tails took Naruto to an island where he was to learn to control the Kyuubi's chakra so he wouldn't rampage every time he used it. During this time, Madara started the war against the elemental nations using the biju he captured and tore out of their hosts. Naruto and Killer Bee were oblivious to this, however, as the ninja villages kept it that way to keep the last remaining Jinchuriki safe and out of the war. They wanted to keep the two away from Madara in hopes that their biju wouldn't be torn out of them as well. After Killer Bee taught him how to control the Kyuubi, the demon he contained, the war finally reached the island and the man was captured, but not before sending Naruto to a neutral RT of the elemental nations with the Hachibi's power. When he awoke, he couldn't feel Killer Bee's life anymore. His demon was removed, his life taken away, and he, himself, was in one of his least favorite places, a graveyard. As he wandered back to the area, he encountered the final resting place of the Sage of Six Paths, meeting the ghost of the very same man. Truth be told, he was frightened. Because this was the man that defeated the Jubi, nor was it the fact that he was the founder of Jutsu and Chakra. No, it was because he was a ghost. After starting to talk to the man, the sage felt ashamed that he'd split the demon. He took Naruto in for 1 month and trained him. By the end of that month he had become the new Sage of Six Paths with the mastered sage arts taught to him by the Toad Summons. When Naruto arrived at the battlefield, it was devastating. With Kabuto's impure world resurrection jutsu, causing dead soldiers to come alive, the newly revived Akatsuki's forces never seemed to dwindle. He was horrified when he found out that Shino, Choji, Kenkuro and Kiba had already died honorably in battle. After nearly a day of mourning, the Akatsuki attacked again after catching wind of him being there. All the members were there. Madara, Zetsu, and the other resurrected members, minus Itachi, but he knew that the man was revived. They came at them with full intent for capture, and full intent for murder. The fight lasted 6 days, no sleep was allowed, no rest, just constant fighting. Kakashi had eventually killed Kabuto, but his life ended as well in a double knockout. A Chidori through the wannabe Orochimaru's chest, a kunai through the copy ninjas. He felt rage build up, but didn't let it take over. He learned better with Kurabe. Rage and the likes were ions that allowed the demons to run free, be them chained or not. He could do nearly nothing as he watched allies and friends fall. Gaara let out a cry of rage that had echoed from the tips of his toes to the ends of his hair when Temari fell in the hands of Hidan, and that member was slaughtered brutally and no one intended to stop him. They understood perfectly. Gaara was revived only to lose his loved ones. They let him grieve his way and take his revenge. Finally, a Kumo shinobi came up to him and stopped him with a whisper. No one but Naruto knows what was said, and he intend for it to stay that way. On the second day, Anko saved his life. He was once again facing pain, but this time it was him in person and he was doing it against his will. He could sense the chakra disruption in his system. They fought for hours, both not giving into exhaustion. Pain had cornered him and pulled him towards him with his Shinra Tenshi. Naruto closed my eyes, waiting for the fatal blow, but it never came. He opened my eyes and saw Anko had jumped in the way and took the blow for him. Why? He had asked. She simply smiled at him. It's the least I can do for the brat who knew, shared, and defeated the same pain I went through. She had said before dying in his arms. He didn't know what happened to him after that. Everything had turned red, but he awoke the Namikaze legacy right then and there, the Rinnegan. It turned into a battle of bloodline versus bloodline. In the end, Naruto came out victorious and buried Anko next to rare vines, flowers, and glowing moss that would never die or burn out. Lee had nearly lost it when Guy perished. He had defeated 2 of the members only to die in the hands of Deidara, who set off a surprise bomb next to the spandex-wearing man. Lee faced the blonde, missing Nin even though he knew he was at a disadvantage in type. After nearly an hour, Lee won but collapsed due to blood loss. Surprisingly, he didn't lose any limbs, only chunks of flesh. Sakura, after once again defeating Sasori, ran to his aid and started healing him. During this time Lee pronounced his undying and truthful love for the pink-haired woman. Sakura let her tears fall at that and proudly kissed Lee in the middle of the battlefield. By then, Itachi had shown up. At first everyone thought he was a fake or a spy, but he proved otherwise with his Sharingan unmistakable personality that no one could copy. Everyone had known the true story about the Uchiha clan massacre by then. After he had died, the restriction on secrecy was removed and he was accepted. He joined the village's side of the fight and asked Naruto to end his brother if need be. It had to be by his hand, not the hand of a brother, he had said. On the third day, he faced Sasuke. Sasuke looked different. He looked as if he was at the edge, insane. No longer one of common sense. It pained Naruto greatly. Sasuke was too far gone to save. They fought for nearly a day, Sasuke shouting out insults that no longer had any bite and let out laughs that sent shivers down everyone who heard it. It was not a laugh of the sane or one with a soul. It was hollow, dark, and sounded forced and gleeful. By sunrise the next morning, Sasuke had a Rasengan through the heart. Naruto was worse for wears as well. He had a couple of Chidori through the chest and was passed out for 2 full days. When he awoke he discovered that the Akatsuki was defeated. Only Madara remained and slaughtered all who stood in his way. Despite objections from Tsunade and Sakura, he got up and headed to the heart of the battlefield where Kage's and shinobi of all ranks laid dead at the feet of one Madara Uchiha, co-founder of Konohagakure no Sato, traitor to the nations. Well, looks like the little demon decided to crawl out of his burrow and die peacefully at the hand of his better. The Uchiha had said. Naruto just stood there, staring at him calmly, and knew it unnerved the Uchiha. He felt it in the shift of nature chakra that surrounded him and avoided him like he was a plague of nature itself. He attacked first. They battled it out for half a day with blood and glares flying in all directions. After realizing that nature, chakra and the Rinnegan itself wouldn't cut it with this man, he unleashed Kyuubi's chakra. At first Naruto was winning. Thinking it was over, he pinned the traitor to the ground and prepared for the final strike. What he didn't expect was for giant claws to strike his back. Madara came to battle with backup. The Biju that were controlled by his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan were there, teeth bared and claws flexing. Pain flowing off of them from being under the man's control, and it pained him. He battled them for hours on end, losing track of the time after the first 2 hours. He kept trying to bring them back into control. Even the Kyuubi decided to help with him, quoting memories the demons had together, but nothing seemed to work. Madara's control on them was too strong. Being pinned to a corner, beaten and bloody, vision fading, he did the only thing that a sage of 6 paths could do to save himself, the nations, and the Biju themselves. He sealed them into himself. The power it took for them being combined into him sent Madara flying back and every other living creature within miles and miles. After seeing this, the Jubi decided it was time for him to retire, to pass on his legacy to another. He chose me, his container, heir to the Namikaze clan, heir to the Uzumaki clan, and heir to the Jubi I had become. He had felt incredible power fill his veins. He felt demonic chakra, power and influence fill his veins. But he didn't panic. In fact, he felt refreshed, healed, and ready to fight Madara again. And it wasn't much of a fight. Madara, being tired and beaten by him, wasn't up to the challenge of a fight no matter how hard he tried. He sought to control him using his Sharingan but failed. Naruto formed a Rasen Shuriken and slammed it into his head, destroying those he once loved and now dreaded eyes for good. Madara, however, knew he was going to die, so he did one last jutsu as revenge. Naruto, despite the boost in power, was exhausted and thought he defeated Mad Era only to notice the attack 1 minuet late. The next thing he knew was that there was a hole right next to his heart and he blacked out right after Madara collapsed to the ground once more. He faded in and out of consciousness many times, hearing whispers and shouts of worry from familiar voices, but he was too far gone to recognize the owners. He felt something pulling him, something beckoning him away. He felt scared. He didn't know what was going to happen. The last conscious thing he heard was 9 echoing voices. "We're not going to let the Shinigami have you." When he awoke he was lying on a floating rock in a black and green world. That, however, wasn't at the top of his panic list. It was the fact that he had claws, slitted red eyes, a silver glow, atop his head were silver and blonde-tipped fox ears instead of his real ones, and he counted 45 fox tails of the same coloring. Then, Kyuubi's weak and wheezing voice came into his head and quickly explained the situation. The Biju were very thankful for him to have saved them from Madara. Instead of letting him fall into the Shinigami's hands like was planned before, they used all their strength to place their power into him and kept him from his soul being taken by the Shinigami, going to hell, or going to heaven. He was in a place called the Ghost Zone, currently in a part of it called the Abyss. When he was old he was a ghost. He was on near hysterical levels of panic and it took an hour for Kyuubi to finally calm him down and get him to accept his fate. He had gained the tails when everyone combined their power into him. Him being a fox because that was what his spirit was most used to. Soon after, Kyuubi bid his farewells and faded from his mind. Naruto did shed a few tears as he felt lonely for a while. He never expected that he'd miss the annoying fuzzball. He wandered the abyss for a while, coming into contact with the strangest ghosts imaginable and being randomly attacked. He had come to harmony with his inner fox and had become a little sadistic for dealing with ghosts. He blamed it on his past fear and need for them to just go away. He had learned that the abyss was where the most powerful ghosts of the Ghost Zone resided. He had heard of a ghost called Pariah that called himself the King of the Ghost Zone, that resided in the normal part of the zone and tried to invade to take control of the abyss. Word reached them when some of the weakest ghosts in the abyss got fed up with him and put him into a sleep of some sort in his castle. He had laughed. This so-called king was only kidding himself. The king of the abyss was the one in real power. After a million years of training in both human ghost powers and demonic ones, he had gained a total of 100 tails, the Hyakubi or 100 tails. Normally, he kept merely 10 out as 100 swinging behind him was a pain. He had learned to become his giant fox from easily. He hadn't aged from his 17-year-old body. But that was to be expected as he was dead. The Rinnegan was a harder thing to control. As he had no idea how to control or use it, it took him years to master it and call upon it when needed. He understood at times why Pain felt like a god. The Rinnegan's power was enormous. As he grew in power, the continent split and the people could no longer use chakra, their bodies changing and adapting to live without it. At first Naruto had become angry, but he let it slide because they still remembered the time with chakra, they remembered the wars. One day, while he was taking a walk or a float, as ghosts sometimes say, he had bumped into a large 12-foot man covered in armor, a strange symbol in the middle of his head. It had a 4-pointed star in the middle with a line running along his head like a crown embedded into his skin. He had drawled out an apology only to be stopped by the man who started shouting about insolence and challenged him to a fight. It was pathetic. Naruto easily won, ending the annoying man's afterlife. and started to walk away only for one of the men littering the man's body to call out to him. It was then that Naruto found out that this man was the king of the abyss. And, since he had defeated the king, he was now the new king. As if to emphasize this claim, the strange marking atop of the man's forehead disappeared and reappeared onto his. His hair easily hid most of it, but the star in the middle was shown because of the way his hair fell. He had become the king and accepted that. It took a while to calm the rebellions and anyone who opposed him and wanted to become king themselves, but eventually it all died down and they pledged loyalty to him. Ghosts may be traitorous at times, but once they pledged loyalty the way they did, it was never wavered. As another million years passed, he watched the living do amazing feats. They built buildings that breached the clouds and touched the sky. Giant metal contraptions could reach off the ground and soar like an eagle along the horizon. This made people narrow-minded, naive, and simply stupid. They refused to believe that anything like chakra or such ever existed, forgetting about their past, which angered Naruto. They remembered petty wars like the World Wars, but not the ones that truly depended on their existence, like the Fourth Shinobi War. Without it, he doubted that the lot of them would be alive. He sighed and stood up, letting the sheets slide off him, and revealed him in black boxers. Over the years he had gotten over his "kill me orange" love and moved more to dark colors like black. It was easier to sneak around in, and he just found a likeness for the black. A knock echoed off of the large double doors of his chambers, and a beautiful ghost girl in a beautiful, thin Victorian-styled dress walked in. It showed off her cleavage and arms and held tightly around her body, showing a well-toned and developed body of a seemingly 17-year-old. She had dark blue hair with silver highlights that reached her thighs, encasing her body and made her green eyes seem to glow. Her body was encased in a soft silverfish blue glow that gave off a calm yet deadly feeling. Her name was Shadow. She was born in Victorian England, a daughter of a well-off earl. She was one of the most beautiful in England at the time, sought after by every man that laid eyes on her. She was a perfect girl. She mingled, she was kind. She blended into the background in conversations like a good little girl and spoke to the influential men her father told her to. On the inside, though, she wanted to be wild. One day, a man infatuated with her kidnapped her from her home the day after she turned 17. She had just been promised to a duke, depressing many of her bachelors. This man, however, had the idea of her being with another man. If I can't have you, no one will," he had proclaimed before stabbing her in the heart. She woke up in the ghost zone. Naruto had been touring the area AF. Tear slipping away from the guards and met her. It was strange for her to become a ghost when she wasn't obsessed with any time but freedom. She had no object she was attached to, nothing. He took her eye, and as his head made and her powers over darkness greatened, and she became one of the most powerful in the abyss. She abandoned her human name and took up another, Shadow. Over time, she gained an obsession, Naruto. Naruto was surprised at first but let it slide. He knew that he'd remain the only ghost in the ghost zone that was without an obsession. After all, he wasn't supposed to become a ghost in the first place. He was the oddball. "What do you need, Shadow?" he asked. She briefly blushed at his lack of clothing before she shook it off. "The council wishes to speak with you about an important matter." The council. This one wasn't like the ones in the elemental nations. True, they had a thirst for power, but Naruto put them in their place when he became king. They were more informers and ones that gave suggestions than anything else. Why? The council rarely called him, as they knew it just annoyed and pissed the hell out of him. Despite the difference in the way the council works, he still had bad experiences with councils before, and just one that acts differently won't change his mind about loathing them. They didn't say. Naruto sighed. A million years of being king and listening to trivial things and ridiculous notions has worn his patience thin. He had learned to become hard, stern, and always looked for the reasons of things. Not knowing what something was about irritated him. "Very well. Thank you, Shadow." He gestured for her to come forward. Eagerly, she did and was swept into a kiss. Despite her being a maid, it was of her own accord, so he believed she deserved some form of payment. She never seemed happy with money but with affections. That didn't mean he felt nothing for her, it was quite the opposite. He felt quite a bit of like an attraction towards her. But he learned to tread carefully when it comes to love, ghosts, and kings. He pulled away and smirked down at her flushed and blissful face. "Gee, thank you, my king," she said as if in another world, and swept out of the room. He had become a flirt in a way, he knew. He blamed Jiraiya and the effects of being with him finally showing up. He loved women, everything about them was perfect. He wasn't a super pervert like that white-haired old man, but he had his moments. He walked over to the closet. He could have floated, he knew, but he was a ninja at birth. He loved his cardio, running, and walking. He slipped on baggy black jeans and wrapped a chain around his hips as a belt. He placed the necklace that Tsunade had given him. It somehow accompanied him into the afterlife, around his neck, and D pulled on fingerless iron-knuckled gloves onto his hands. He didn't wear a shirt as he found it was restricting, and his cloths got ripped enough times when he transforms into his giant fox form. The only thing that doesn't rip is, thank God, his underwear. Besides, it was fun seeing girls faint at the sight of him. He exited his chambers and headed towards the council room. The castle was all RGE medieval England style and could house hundreds. It was built for Naruto by the ghosts in hopes of appeasing him and to get on his good side. He had to admit he was impressed. It was a much better present than what he ever got in life. He stopped in the middle of the hallway, right above the council room. Turning intangible, he sank into the floor and landed onto the throne, startling the council members. His 10 tails rested behind him as he leaned back. "What is it?" A council member, Hush, the only one he actually got along with, stepped forward. He was a man of 22 when he died. He liked the quiet and sound, thus being his strange obsession when he died. He had gained powers over sound. "We have a problem." "Oh, what kind of problem?" "I swear if Drake is peeping in on the girls again No, nothing of that sorts, my king." A council member, he couldn't remember her name, interrupted quickly. "Then why am I here when I can be having my breakfast? I'm ready for my ramen," he grumbled while the council members' sweat dropped. If they didn't know any better they would have said that his obsession in death was ramen. Their king sometimes had it multiple times a day. Ghosts didn't need to eat, but Naruto refused to go an entire afterlife without ramen. "It's those observants again," Hush said. Naruto groaned. The observants resided in the normal part of the ghosts' chi zone and could see everything in time except the abyss. This hurt their pride, however, and has tried multiple times to see and enter the abyss, much the annoyance of its residents. Couldn't they be more like clockwork and just accept that they can't see something? He was about ready to just send someone to slaughter them all to forever erase the growing headache that they were. "What are they doing this time?" "They're planning on an infiltration, my lord," another said. This one was female, quite an ugly ghost with welts all over her body and a seemingly crush on Naruto. The king shuddered at the mere thought of dating her. An infiltration? Are they idiots? Apparently so, Hush said quietly, almost a whisper. Naruto liked his quiet voice. It was a nice change from those loud ghosts that wail all the time. But, when Hush gets loud, look out. He was dangerous. "What do you wish us to do, my king?" "Scare them off. Block off the entrance to the abyss, I don't care. The most important thing right now is the fact that I'm losing valuable time to eat my ramen." He hissed. The room, besides Hush, shuddered. When their king got angry or went through ramen withdrawal, he got quite scary. "Hush, you're in charge of whatever you decide." Of course, he was used to the king's antics. The blonde rarely handled anything that didn't interest him. At first he had taken an interest in the servants but soon lost it after their 4th try. "Is that all?" "Unfortunately not," Hush said. "We've discovered that 2 months ago Pariah Dark was released. And this concerns me. Why? As long as he doesn't disrupt the abyss, then everything's going to be just fine." He grinned. "The thing is, my lord, is that someone resealed him." Naruto's grin fell from his face. Who could have sealed the most powerful ghost in the normal part? "I'm not saying he's strong compared to us by any means, but where he resides he's like a god. A new ghost did it, a boy who appeared 4 months ago. He calls himself Danny Phantom. He defeated Pariah with his own strength amplified by a human weapon." 4 months. Isn't that when I felt the rip in the zone appear? Yes. Apparently, he's half ghost. A half ghost. Naruto echoed after a moment of silence. Hush grinned, knowing exactly what was going to happen. Yes, it's been confirmed. It was quiet for a while longer before dark chuckles started to echo throughout the room. Hush watched in amusement while the rest gulped. Naruto's lips curled back to show shark-like teeth and fangs. Interesting, so very interesting. I've never heard of such a thing. He crossed his legs. I haven't been in the human realm for a while. I think I'll pay it a little visit. But my lord, your duties. You can't just leave. I need a vacation. Plus, a half-ghost. How very intriguing indeed. Reaper was not known for being the most approachable person in the abyss. His quiet and cold demeanor caused ghosts to avoid him like a plague. He was the king's most trusted general. A friend, one could say, a willing tool. This relationship with the king also made people wary of him. Get on his wrong side and he just might complain to the king. Reaper was not his real name. His real name was Thanatos. No one but two people knew this, however, only the king and his friend Draco of the dragon tribe. Reaper went along with his image. Reaper was the name he was given by the abyss. He understood the reasoning behind his nickname. He always carried around a scythe and wore a black flowing cloak and was always seen with the hood up. A skull mask sat on T. He sighed of the hood even though it was never used because of the shadow cast over his face. All that could ever be seen were the flashes of raging red that were determined to do all of the king's wishes without fail. He was known as the Grim Reaper, the bringer of death, the one that never fails, the king's Shinigami. There were two things he treasured above all others. One was the king's approval. He'd do anything for the man. Naruto had saved his afterlife, had helped him when he lost control, had brought him out of the consuming darkness of death. All his loyalty was sworn to the king. Every last drop of it belonged to him. Destroy a mountain. He'd do it. Obliterate the earth. He'd do it. If it made the king smile and praise him, he'd gladly jump into a volcano and die again. The second thing was sleep. When he wasn't needed, he'd take a nap. When he was on break, he'd go to sleep if he could. It was one of the only times a ghost could truly relax and escape the horrors of death. Escape the empty feeling of no longer being alive. Everyone knew that disturbing his sleep without a good reason would mean death. And here he was, awake in the middle of the night, glaring at those who were stupid enough to awake him, the council. He felt his eye twitch under the shadow of his hood, wondering what the fools wanted his time. Hush wasn't there to keep them in line or tolerate. So he wasn't looking forward to their tantrum. What do you want? He gritted out. General Reaper, sir, we are here on important business. I can see that. You woke me up at midnight. He hissed, his red eyes starting to glow. The king wishes to go to the human world. He wants to go see an abomination, a half-ghost. Since when were there one of those? He shook his head slightly, knowing that Naruto would be completely interested in something like that. A small, hidden smile quirked at his lips at the terror that Halpha will probably experience in the future. And what do you want me to do about it? Reaper asked. You must stop him. He has duties he must attend to. He has documents he must sign. He can't just go on a vacation. Well, I'm not going to. Unlike you, I know my place. Whatever the king wants he will get, whatever he does he can do it. It's as simple as that. Accepting it will save you a lot of stress and a lot of pain. Reaper said, leaning against the side of his door. He was getting a headache. But sir, you must try. He shouldn't waste his valuable time on a creature such as this. It is not deserving of our king's attention. He won't listen to us, but he'll listen to you. The earth doesn't deserve his presence. You, shut up. He growled, his red eyes at full glow. He glared at them until they started to cower. You wake me up, I end the middle of the goddamn night and start screeching like a baby banshee in my ear and expect me to help you. I'm loyal to no one but the king. Leave. But sir, I said leave, he shouted, reaching for his scythe. When the council saw this, they flinched and bowed before floating away, faster than normal, one might add. He watched them leave before sighing, content. It was once again quiet enough to sleep. You know, I always feel bad for you. I'm glad I don't get bothered by them. Reaper turned to see a giant dragon floating in place with a cocky smile formed onto its sharp-toothed lips. Its body was black with the outline painted red as if dipped in blood. Its spine was covered in spikes all the way down to the tip of its tail. While its back was black, its chest was red going to the tips of his black clawed feet. "What are you doing here, Draco? Don't you know what time it is?" he scoffed. "Of course I do." Fire enveloped him. When the fire died, a dragon no longer stood before Reaper but a boy around 19 with slitted golden eyes and black hair with red tips. I'm not an idiot. Draco was a dragon. Unlike that kingdom in the ghost zone where a human can turn into a dragon using an amulet. He was a genuine dragon. When a dragon was slain in the past, they'd either be reincarnated or appear in the abyss. Draco was one of those dragons. The dragons lived in the mountains of Fang, an area near the castle that was purely earth-like mountains. Because of this, the dragons put a claim to it and were granted the right to them. Unlike the ghost zone, there were places in the abyss that were just like Earth. The Fang Mountains, for example. And why are you here? Oh, don't get cloak in a bunch. I'm not trying to keep you from your beauty sleep. He chuckled only to find a sigh at his throat. He held up his hands in surrender. Hey, it was a joke. Just a joke. I don't joke, he grumbled, turning around and walking into his home. He went to slam the door in the Dr. Agon's face only to find Draco already in. He felt an eye twitch. I know you don't. Why are you here? The king wants you. His eyebrows rose at this. How do you know? I don't think the king would go to you just to fetch me. When Draco gave him a look, he sighed. All right, he would, but why do you know this? Draco grinned, his teeth still as sharp as they were in his dragon form. I was told by her. Reaper's eyes widened for a second before chuckling. Of course it was her, Oracle. Oracle was just that. An oracle of great power, a seer. She could see glimpses of the future and past everywhere and anywhere. She was also known for her great beauty and closeness to the king. Due to her ability and closeness of the king, she's sought after by many, wanting her power and influence for themselves. As such, she resides with the powerful dragons for protection, as even those in the abyss would think twice before challenging a single dragon, let alone them all. What does His Highness wish of me? Draco shrugged as he collapsed onto Reaper's black couch. Dunno. All she said was the king wants you, with a smile on her face. And she wasn't more specific. No. He sighed again and turned around, heading for the door. Are you giving me a ride? Nah. I think I'm going to crash here for a while. Maybe sleep on your couch. I'm tired. He yawned. Reaper was going to point out that he didn't give him permission to stay here. He was about to say that he was tired as well and couldn't sleep on his couch without his say-so, but let it slide. The dragon had come all the way here to tell the message, so the least he could do was lend him his couch. Danny dodged another one of Skulker's beams, twisting as he dodged again. Skulker snarled at this, his mechanical eyes narrowing in anger. As he saw his prey dodge beam after beam. How dare that Brad deny him his hunt? How dare he defy him? Stop moving, whelp, he shouted, charging for the boy. After dodging the last beam, Danny turned to face Skulker, and his eyes widened when the mechanical ghost rammed into him, sending him through the wall of the building behind him. Skulker grinned while Sam and Tucker gasped as smoke from the rubble shot up around the impact area, blocking their view of the teenage Halfa. Danny, his two friends shouted in worry. Despite their ghostly friend knowing what he was doing, they couldn't help but worry. They watched as the smoke from the crash cleared to show an empty hole. Skulker blinked stupidly for a moment before gasping as the ghost boy rammed into his back using his foot, painfully digging his heel into the metal spine of the suit. Skulker slammed into the road below, creating a small crater. Danny's hands started to glow green and he threw an ectoblast towards the crater and heard Skulker shout out. He waited for a moment, but Skulker didn't come out. He started to back up in the sky, away from the crater just in case Skulker shot out. A smile formed onto his face. Are you all right? Tucker called out. Danny turned to them and smiled, flexing his arms. Of course. He beamed only to get blasted back. Not for long, ghost child. Soon your head will be nothing but a trophy on my wall and body a rug at the foot of my bed. The three shivered. Ew. Skulker jumped out of his hole, his rockets blasting him up towards the ghost boy with his arms out in front of himself. Annie's arms shot out as well and connected with mechanical ones, each fighting for dominance by pushing all their strength and weight onto the other. Give it up, ghost child. Today's the day I win. Skulker grunted out, moving Danny back a little. Danny groaned at the strain and pushed back. No way, Skulker. I'd never lose to you or anybody like you. There's always someone who can beat you, silly whelp. I just happen to be that one. He shouted, grabbing onto Danny's wrists, causing the Halfa's eyes to widen, and tossing him towards the ground. Danny impacted painfully onto the concrete and groaned slightly, straining to sit up. He saw Skulker charging for him once more. He rolled out of the way, causing the ghost to slam into the ground. Seeing his chance, his hands and green eyes started to glow blue. Skulker pulled his head out of the ground with a grunt, falling back onto his ass. He rubbed his head and turned to the boy, only for his eyes to widen comically when he saw a beam of blue heading straight towards him. Shish, was all he got out before he froze over. Danny grinned triumphantly and stood up with a small grimace. He turned to his friends and held out his hand. Tucker congratulated Danny as he threw him the thermos. Nice one, Danny. Thanks, the half-ghost teen said as he sucked the mechanical ghost into the device. How long have we been fighting? An hour. He blinked for a moment. What, an hour? You were fighting him for an hour, Danny. Sam said, crossing her arms. And school has already started. 45 minutes ago to be exact. Tucker finished, looking at his PDA for the exact time. Danny groaned as 2 rings enveloped him. Standing before the 2 teenagers was no longer Danny Phantom, hero and villain of Amity Park, but Danny Fenton. Lancer is going to kill me. Hey, don't feel bad, Tucker said, wrapping his arm around Danny's shoulders in a friendly gesture. Sam rolled her eyes. We're in the same class, Tucker. He's going to kill us as well. Tucker's face fell. Mr. Fenton, Miss Manson, Mr. Foley, do you mind telling me why you're late? Mr. Lancer inquired as the 3 walked into the room. They flinched at getting caught as they had tried to sneak in. Mr. Lancer, however, was used to their sneaky antics and could now spot those 3 miles away. Well, you see, Danny began before Sam. Wonderful, beautiful, amazing. Gee, Sam. Saved him from embarrassment and detention. We had to take a detour because of a crash. They weren't letting anybody through, so we had to take the long way. She said in a straight face with a sigh in exasperation. Her 2 friends swore that if she wanted to be an actress she'd damn well make it to the top. Mr. Lancer eyed them for a moment before sighing. He couldn't give them a detention for that. He nodded. Very well, sit down before I change my mind. The 3 went to their seats, Tucker and Danny smiling at Sam, who sat up straight proudly. He flashed the 2 a grin, saying, You owe me, in the twinkle of her eyes. The 2 nodded to her before facing the front. Danny turned to look out the window. He sighed. Fighting ghosts were getting harder and harder. He wasn't the only one getting stronger, they all were. He rarely had time to grow in strength besides the weekend because of school and preventing the ghosts from attacking people. He was afraid that if a really strong host appeared, then he wouldn't be able to defeat it. Sure, he had Tucker and Sam to help him, but they were only human. They had their limits in things they could do, and he didn't want them to get hurt. If they did, he wouldn't be able to live with himself, he'd die on the inside. He'd prevented that outcome once and he didn't want to do it again. He wrinkled his nose. Not only were the ghosts getting stronger, but his parents' ghost weapons were getting better. They were at the point where he knew his parents were starting to get suspicious on how all their ghost materials were acting up to his presence. It was only a matter of time before they found out, he knew, if he didn't do something about them quick. Swore this question. Mr. Fenton. Mr. Fenton. Danny jumped slightly when Lancer shouted his name. He turned to see a slightly annoyed teacher glaring at him and all the students staring at him. He felt a slight blush creep up onto his cheeks. Why, yes, Mr. Fenton. If you're done daydreaming, I'd like you to. Everything froze. Danny blinked for a moment and looked to Sam and Tucker, who were frozen as well. He waved his hand in front of them and they didn't react. He raised an eyebrow before feeling something heavy on his chest and looked down to see a medallion around his neck. Clockwork, he muttered. Correct, Daniel. The Halfa spun around to face Clockwork in his old man form, floating at the back of the room. Why are you here? We must speak, Daniel, now. There was urgency in his voice that startled Danny. Clockwork never sounded like this. not even when he was dealing with his future evil self. He nodded and quickly transformed. Over the last few months Sam had decided that his jumpsuit just didn't fit the theme of hero, so she had forced him to change. Al wore a long-sleeved black shirt that still covered his hands. The collar went up half of his neck and white stripes outlined the side of his shirt, coming down the side of the neck to the tips of his middle fingers and down the sides of his chest. He wore a sleeveless white jacket that only went down half of his chest and remained unzipped so one could see the DP sign on his chest. His pants were tight but didn't hug his body. They were black as well with white stripes down the sides as well. He wore a white and black belt to keep them up with black, white-tipped shoes. "What is it? Follow me, Daniel," he said with a green portal appearing behind him. "What's wrong?" "Now Daniel, we'll talk as soon as we arrive." Danny narrowed his eyes. He knew that whatever he was about to hear he wasn't going to like it. Reaper walked into the throne room with an irritated look on his face. The guards, obviously new, had tried to stop him from entering the castle. Now normally he might understand because they were new at their job, but it was the middle of the night and the king wanted him. He didn't have the time or patience to deal with them. At the moment they were probably still lying unconscious at the door. Someone would find them, eventually. He bowed before the smirking king. "My lord," he said. "Hello Reaper." Reaper. Naruto always called him Thanatos when they were alone. Looking around the room he saw Shadow standing in wait for her king. He narrowed his eyes. The two never did get along very well, always competing on who could please the king first for different reasons. "Shadow." She eyed him and wrinkled her nose. "Reaper. It's wonderful that you two are such close friends, isn't it?" Naruto teased, chuckling to himself as the two glared at each other. He stood up. "I'm sorry to have called you so late at night. I know you love your sleep." "If it's for my king then sleep does not matter." Naruto smiled. "That's the kind of attitude I like. I'm glad you made it though. It seems my assumption that Oracle would know was correct. Yes, and now I have a dragon sleeping in my home." He grumbled. Shadow rolled her eyes. "Stop complaining, will you?" He glared at her again. "What was that, wench?" She crossed her arms and shared an equally demonic gaze with him. "You heard me, you freak in a dress. It's a cloak." He hissed at her. "A cloak? Really?" She grinned. "I could have sworn you were a cross-dresser." Enough," Naruto commanded with amusement in his voice. Hearing their king's voice the two immediately quieted and looked to him. "I'm glad you both made it. I have a task for both of you." "A task?" Reaper said thoughtfully. "With him," Shadow muttered. "Yes, I'm going to the living world to do a little, how should I say this, documentation. No, who am I kidding? I'm going to have fun and see this infamous Halpha. You two are coming with me." "To the living world," Reaper repeated. He knew that his king was going, he just didn't expect he'd go as well. "Yes, consider this a vacation. Though you don't seem very surprised, Reaper. The council came to me in hopes I'd stop you. Are you? I know my place." "Good." Naruto smiled. "I'd like to leave as soon as possible. I've already put Hush in charge until I return, so I'm only waiting on you two." In a flash, the two were gone. Naruto chuckled at their enthusiasm and couldn't help but remember that around 2 million years ago he didn't have loyalty like this. He doubted that even after the war people would give him loyalty like this. A small, true smile formed on his lips. Being loved, respected, and feared, it oddly felt nice. Danny appeared in Clockwork's home and stumbled slightly. He'd never get used to traveling through portals, ever. Teleporting was one thing, portals were another. He looked up at Clockwork, who was in his child form. "We have a problem." "What problem?" "Have you ever heard of the Abyss?" Danny shook his head at the unfamiliar term. He'd heard of abysses before, but he was pretty sure that this abyss was something different. "No, the Abyss is a part of the ghost zone where even I cannot see." Danny's eyes widened. "Wait, I thought you could see everything." Clockwork sighed and turned into his 25-year-old form. "The ghosts there are too strong for me to see." Danny stopped breathing for a moment. Too strong for Clockwork to see. But he could see Pariah and his future self just fine. It should be impossible. Dark Phantom and Pariah each took over the ghost zone. How could something be more powerful than that? But Pariah took over that place once before, didn't he? Dark as well, he said, hoping Clockwork would say, yes, but he had to utter those words that he dreaded. No, Danny. Pariah tried once before but he didn't even last 10 minutes in there. Dark knew that even he couldn't win, so he stayed clear of it. Let me put it this way, Danny. The weakest ghosts in the abyss are stronger than Pariah, Dark and Dark Phantom. Danny's face paled to a color even unhealthy for a ghost. He felt his heart sink and his eyes dilate in fear. Stronger than Pariah. The weakest. Stronger than Pariah and Dark Phantom. Stronger. He felt faint. Why are you telling me this? He asked, though he didn't want to know the answer. I have troubling news. Please don't tell me there's a ghost from the abyss heading towards Amity Park. Please, he pleaded, shaking somewhat at the thought of having to fight a creature like that. I'm not sure, Clockwork said. However, I did get a glimpse of something you might want to see. Clockwork gestured towards a large clock-like mirror, and an image appeared on it that caused Danny to shiver. A black figure stood in the middle of flames. All that could be seen were glowing red eyes and a shark-like smile. Something was flowing behind the figure, but he couldn't tell what. All he knew was that the image just shouted out, "Danger," and his instincts were screaming for him to flee at the mere sight. All I know is that this ghost is from the abyss. I don't know if it's heading to Amity Park or not, but the Master of Time quieted down. Danny gulped. You think he is, don't you? It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Yes. What do? I can't protect anyone against something like that. What do I? Calm yourself, Daniel. Calm myself. Calm myself. There's a ghost, stronger than Pariah, Dark, on his way here. Need I remind you that I couldn't even defeat Pariah on my own without my dad's suit? I can't win against something like this, I can't. Yes you can, Daniel, yes you can. I might not be able to see the future right now, but I know that if anyone can, it's you. You can't if you say you can't, but what's that saying? You can do anything you put your mind to. You're the definition of that saying, Danny. The ghost boy calmed somewhat. How though? I don't have the suit anymore, so I can't use it. All I can say is train and prepare. Clockwork said, turning to face the image. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. All I can say is that our only hope lies in you. I'll try, Clockwork, but I don't know if I can. Sebastian was an older-looking ghost, but he was one of pride. He was thin, bony and hunched over with the aid of a cane. His hair was white with a long beard and short head hair. His face was wrinkled, his lips thin, and his eyes a unique orange. His skin was the color of the first snowfall with black nails. His appearance was a man that screamed that he was about to keel over and die any second, but that's one of the things he loved about it. It was easier to hide. He was the king's head general and proud of it. He had served this position for generation after generation of kings, and so far Naruto was his favorite. The boy was unpredictable, strong, loved to have fun, but had a no-nonsense attitude when it was needed, and ruled with a kind yet firm fist with the likes he hadn't seen since his death. It made him proud to have survived in the abyss this long and met Naruto. He felt privileged to be acquainted with such a man. As the head general, it was his duty to protect the king and stay close by him but remain inconspicuous. A past king, one whose name he didn't remember as the poor guy didn't last very long, came up with a marvelous idea of him being the king's personal butler. At first he wasn't happy with this command, but found it rather genius. His duties were performed much better, as the only ones who knew his status as head general was the other generals and the king, this time the exception being Shadow and Draco, who found out themselves. Out of the 10 generals he was the strongest by far. Due to his age and talent he has been surpassed by no one but Naruto. He was stronger than many of he kings, yet he felt to wish to take over. Being king would be too troublesome for him, and due to his looks would be underestimated and challenged too many times. So, he devoted his life to serving them instead. His life would forever be the head general, and he would die the moment he was not. He and the other generals were normally ignored by the kings, believing that they were not worth his time, and especially himself. He had expected the same thing to happen this time, but Naruto wouldn't stand for that. Oh no. He had to go and make either friends or acquaintances of the generals. The council, however, was ignored and treated like dogs besides a select few. At first this had surprised him, and he was rather reluctant, certain that there was a separate motive behind it, but it didn't take long to realize that Naruto was sincere. Why live in a divided household when you can easily live in a joined one? Naruto had said that once. Like the other generals, they had been surprised and silent for days until they finally accepted their new king's ways. During the man's reign many were replaced, true, but he still kept in contact with the former generals who had either retired or decreased in rank. He himself had become great friends with his king and loved every minute of it. The only thing he didn't like about the boy was his given nickname, Gigi. Naruto refused to call him anything else no matter how much he begged, and finally relented after many years. At the moment he was being summoned by his lord and happily dropped what he was doing. He walked through the double doors and immediately walked halfway into the room. Bowed, walked up till he was a few feet in front of the throne, and then knelt down with his face towards the ground. He never showed disrespect like many of T.H.O.'s young whippersnappers with too much power on their hands. Gigi. Just the old man I was looking for. The king's voice echoed. He looked up, his neck the only part of his body that moved, and locked his orange eyes with his king's slitted blood-colored ones that danced with friendly amusement. You got here in record time. What happened? Did the kitchen catch fire again? He inquired, smiling. When he remembered the time when the kitchen actually did spontaneously burst into flames for a reason that no one had yet figured out to this day. Sebastian's thin lips twitched up into a small smile. Ah, not this time, my lord. I was close by and not doing anything of importance, otherwise I wouldn't have gotten here so soon. You see, my old bones have been acting up again. It's probably due to my old age. Who knows? I might be unable to move soon if it keeps up. The amusement on Naruto's face increased greatly. He always found it entertaining when the man pretended to be a frail old human with body problems that joked about his age. Careful, karma has a way to turn your words around. She always does, especially with me. He laughed. Sebastian chuckled. That's true. Once he sentenced a ghost to death without a trial because of a headache and was confronted about it by the council. What's gonna happen? Fire falling from the sky. His king had snapped at them. However, it just so happens that a powerful volcano near the palace called Mount Minato, formerly Mount Bloody Mary for reasons he cannot fathom, but was quickly changed by Naruto in honor of his father when he came into power, had decided to erupt at that moment, shooting flaming hot lava into the sky and landing right on top of Naruto's head. The king had been unharmed and annoyed to hell, but he had listened to karma, lest it happen again, and granted the man a trial only to find out that the man wasn't the criminal and the real one was apprehended after the frame was on the other man was found out. He always granted a trial after that. Now, the reason I called you here, Naruto began, leaning back in his chair in a relaxed position. I'm going to the living world, the human zone, the area of the alive, the place of the living. Whatever you prefer to call it, and taking Shadow and Reaper with me. I know you'll want to join me, so I'm warning you ahead of time. Think of it as a long-deserved vacation. This was something he did not expect. Sure. This was Naruto and it wasn't a surprise per se, but he surely wasn't expecting this. Why? He asked, finding himself curious. Naruto had never shown any interest in areas outside of the abyss and rarely the ghost zone. Knowing the king, something caught his interest. Well, I want to see this famous halfa in this town called Amity Park, a favorite ghost area from what I'm told. A halfa. Sebastian tasted the words, not having heard that term before. I'm told he's a half ghost, half human, half ghost. They say he resealed Pariah Dark when he was released from the coffin that he was sleeping in like a vampire. The head general wrinkled his forehead. Half ghost, half human, my lord. Impossible. That's why I'm going to see it for myself. The king chirped. If he truly is what they say, then I'm going to have some fun with him. He chuckled darkly, his eyes glazing over with dark thoughts. The old ghost shook his head, feeling somewhat sorry for this creature. He incurred the king's curiosity and trickster side. If he existed and proved to be entertaining, then Naruto would stay in Amity Park for a long time, sending ghost after ghost to torment poor creature for his own entertainment. He might even appear personally sometime. He sighed. This was going to be a long vacation. When do we leave, my lord? He asked, knowing that there was no changing the blonde's mind. As soon as possible, and don't keep me waiting. I may be patient at times, but I want to see this being as soon as possible. I'm sure you can accomplish this easily, right, Gigi? Yes, my lord. Sebastian bowed his head, phasing through the floor to get ready to leave and get all his affairs in order. Naruto sat still until the old man vanished before his smile dropped and he sighed. He was already bored and the need for entertainment was almost killing him. Sebastian, one of the closest people he had in the abyss, was able to distract him for the few minutes he was here. But unfortunately a few minutes weren't long, especially for someone who's dead and no longer burdened by the strain of time. Sure, the dead still had a future, but it never ended. My king. Naruto looked up to see a figure kneeling down before him. He mentally hit himself for being so immersed in his thoughts that he didn't notice the ghost enter. When the man raised his head he smirked, immediately recognizing the man. Haristo. Haristo was a thin, young-looking man. He had long, braided white hair and his skin was a pale blue, giving off a white glow. He wore the traditional clothes of his people, the Atlanteans, and his red eyes sparkled with greed. However, this greed wasn't for money, fame or gold. This greed was for all the world's knowledge and discovery. When he was alive, Haristo was Atlantis' greatest researcher and scientist, having almost as much power and influence in the city as the emperor. He had discovered how to harness electricity in a way well before its time, and also uncovered a way to use crystals as energy and power. He was a once-in-a-million-years genius. He had been murdered by a jealous colleague in hopes of taking his place. But, alas, that man's time didn't come as Atlantis sank below the sea not even a year after. Haristo wasn't a man of physical power. Naruto doubted he could take on many of the ghosts in the ghost zone and come out the winner. However, when Naruto snuck out once and met him, he was amazed by the man's intellect. The man didn't normally use big words, but his tone and the way he looked at you only proved that he thought little of you and our brain. Naruto, however, was much older than this man and was able to speak on equal ground despite his admittance that Haristo was smarter than himself. Naruto took him into the abyss and put him in charge of the research and development team and started to get immediate results. If he was given a challenge, Haristo would take it and complete it even if it takes thousands of years. His most recent challenge was no exception. Have you completed what I've asked for? Naruto asked curiously. Knowing this man, he went above and beyond what he asked for. Yes, my king. However, your original request I found demeaning, as anyone can make a simple human body for one ghost to phase into and move as his own. He huffed and pulled out a box, no bigger than one that holds a ring, rimmed with silver and gold. His curiosity piqued. He leaned forward in his throne and stared at that tiny box with a raised eyebrow. What, are you asking me to marry you? He joked. Haristo scowled. No, my king. Then why are you presenting me with a ring box? This is what's going to pass you off as human. Oh, you first came to me with a challenge of making a body you could phase into. I, however, thought it to be a pointless idea. If you need to leave your artificial body, you'd have to find some place to hide it. So, being the genius I am, thought of an alternative. A human skin. Naruto's lips curled up. Will this idea please me? Quote, oh, very much, your highness. Haristo smirked. Of that I have no doubt. Then show me. How about a demonstration then? This one was made especially for you. The white-haired man suggested. His answer being Naruto standing up and gliding towards him. Haristo handed him the box. Simply open it and make sure the opening is facing you. Don't flinch or move or it might mess up. Is there any side effects? Haristo nodded. While you are in this skin, your abilities are reduced by half. That's something I'll be working on and will gradually send you the enhanced ones as time goes on. However, I don't think having your abilities reduced by that much will bother you of all people. Naruto nodded, quite pleased so far. After all, it's only been a few hours since he gave the man the challenge, and so far he couldn't have asked for more. Looking at the box, he slowly opened it and watched as a mass shot out towards him and slammed itself against his face and slowly moved along his body. He didn't move, remembering what Haristo had said, and waited until he felt it no longer moving. Opening his eyes, he saw the Atlantean looking quite pleased with himself. Turning and walking over to a mirror, he couldn't help the impressed look that fell onto his face as he saw himself. He looked human, completely human. Unlike when he was alive, though, his whisker marks were not there and in its place were smooth cheeks. He no longer glowed, had tails, and he couldn't feel his power. You won't be detected as a ghost by anything, Haristo said. If you are wearing different clothes with this skin and call off the skin, the same clothes shall appear when you put it back on. I must say this is one of my best works with the time limit. Naruto turned towards him with a large smile. However, instead of fangs and shark-like teeth he had normal human teeth. Wonderful, Haristo. I'm going to up your budget. While I'm gone, ask a soldier for anything and he or she shall provide it for you. Haristo puffed up at that, a sinister simile molting onto his lips at the thought of all the things he could accomplish. Now, how do I take this off? Simply end the box and point it at yourself just like how you applied it. Naruto did, and the skin shot back in, closing on its own. Do you have one for the others? The scientist nodded before pulling out 3 more and handing them to the king. The purple one is for Shadow, black is for General Reaper, and the orange is for Sebastian, though I don't see why that butler is coming along. Trust me, Sebastian is much more useful than you think. Quote, the man huffed. Is that all? Yes, you may go. Haristo nodded and bowed, quickly walking out the door with grace. Haristo was a peculiar one that normally didn't use his ghost powers, but Naruto did like the change. It was different and he always liked different. I'm back. Shadow phased in from the ceiling, a large smile on her face after a quick look around the courtroom and seeing that she was the first to arrive. Got everything you need, she nodded, reaching into her interdimensional storage, and pulling out a large bag packed to the brim before putting it back. He smiled at her. He too loved the IDM because it followed you around everywhere and you didn't need to carry anything yourself. It was one of the perks about being a ghost. You were fast. Bravo. This is a first. He praised, causing her to beam and saunter over to him with a seductive sway of her hips that any man would have immediately succumbed to. His eyebrow rose. She assembled the most beautiful of seductresses and succubi. He almost felt his lips twitch at that, proud that he was able to resist her charm, and he once again understood why she was one of the most sought-after women in both life and death. She knelt over his lap, a knee on either side of him and a hooded look in her eyes as she wrapped her arms around his neck, making sure to show off her impressive bust. May I have a reward for being so quick and obedient? Her voice was husky, full of lust and want to indulge in her obsession. It was true, she was for once faster than Shadow, who usually beat her by miles. It was something that infuriated her to no end and had always tried to beat, the two arguing about it non-stop. He thought for a moment. Should he? After all, she was fairly fast and could he deny such a position and look? He felt his lips twitch up at it. He wrapped his hand in her long silky tresses and pulled her lips to his in a fiery kiss. Their eyes closed and Shadow molded her body to his, chest touching chest. Naruto's nibbled on her bottom lip before running his rough tongue along them, causing her to moan and immediately open her mouth. Almost instantly Naruto's tongue was in, exploring her mouth and leaving no crevice unturned and trying to get her tongue to dance with his. She obliged eagerly. While their tongues were performing an erotic tango, she ran her hands up his chest, moaning as she felt his strong abs and firm yet smooth chest. Her hands came to a rest between his pecs, right where his heart would be if it was still beating, before she clutched him close, letting his warmth fill her. Unlike most ghosts, Naruto was a fire type, so he emitted heat and warmth, while most ghosts, including her, let out cold. She was in complete bliss at her obsession being fulfilled and lost herself to it. Stop sucking faces with the king, Shadow, it is absolutely disrespectful. Reaper hissed. He had been in the room a while ago and he didn't like being ignored. Naruto he could stand, but he definitely couldn't stand Shadow not acknowledging his existence. Naruto pulled away from the female ghost and looked at his second-in-command general. Shadow slumped against him and rested her blushing and completely on cloud nine face onto the crook of his neck. He shifted the unaware ghost in his arms until she rested at his side and was secure in his left arm. He smirked down at the cloaked ghost. Are you getting slow? I could have sworn that you always beat Shadow. What changed that? Reaper growled. Draco. He accused sharply, his eyes narrowing at even the sound of his name. Draco had made him late with his tomfoolery and he wasn't going to forgive him for a long time nor let him off the hook. He'd get his revenge, oh yes. He had a reputation to uphold. Naruto blinked before smiling mischievously. Oh, so Draco kept you busy. Why Reaper, I didn't know you were into that kind of thing. He teased. The cloaked ghost blinked, confused. Finally, it CKED in his brain and his hidden face turned red. No, he almost shouted, being mindful of where he was. I'm not gay. I like girls, thank you very much. Pity. Naruto sighed, actually looking truly disappointed. It would have been interesting if you were. Too bad. Reaper blanched for a moment before going silent. Naruto will be Naruto and he can never change that, but this is one thing he doesn't understand. One of the infinite mysteries of his king. Got everything. Yes, my king. Wonderful. Now all we have to do is wait for Gigi. Reaper raised a hidden eyebrow. The head general is coming. Of course. Naruto grumbled. He's to follow me everywhere I go, including the living world. That's never stopped you before, Your Highness. Reaper commented, watching as Shadow started to blink and come back. When she realized the position she was in, she blushed but didn't say anything. He nearly scowled. She shouldn't touch the king like that. Naruto chuckled deeply, causing Shadow to purr as his chest vibrated against her. He looked down at her with a look and she pouted as she stood up and seductively walked to stand next to the general. You got that right. I've snuck out more times than he can count. Then why now? Why do you think? The king deadpanned with a roll of his eyes. I'll be gone for a while and if I slip away he'll go batshit crazy on the abyss and create an apocalypse while trying to find me. This way it's safer for my kingdom, the living, and most importantly, me. Reaper's sweat dropped at Naruto's words. Sure, it was probably safer because Sebastian does go crazy whenever he can't find the king, but he doubted it was for all those reasons. He probably just didn't want to be troubled by his head general upturning mountains to look for him. If this were anyone else he might comment on him or her being completely selfish, but this was the king. He couldn't say that. Besides, even if Naruto did have his selfish moments, the reality was that the king was rather selfless. He didn't have the heart to point it out this time. How are you going to deal with this, Alpha, my lord? Shadow hissed out the word as if it was venom. She hated the fact that Naruto was showing such great interest in it. Use him for entertainment, of course. Naruto said like it was the most obvious thing. We'll mess with him and send some of Reaper's subordinates to fight him. My subordinates, sire? Yes. Not only are yours the most easiest to use, but you have some rather interesting ghosts in your division that I'm sure will provide me a show to be remembered. As you wish. Are mine not as approving, my king? Wonderful timing, Gigi. Naruto grinned, turning to face the new arrival. It's not that though, I assure you. In fact, I think rather highly of your division. The head general smiled and bowed lowly. Thank you for your praise. Now, I have something for all of you, courtesy of Haristo. Naruto said, pulling out the 3 boxes. Shadow and Reaper paled. A gift from that psycho. Shadow muttered, I am not sure I wish to have a gift from him. Reaper said, relax. I've already tried it out. They're human skins that will cause us to appear as regular humans while we're there. He said, tossing each of them one. We'll put them on when we get to the living world. Shadow sighed. If it's your wish, as long as it won't kill me, again. Reaper grumbled. Naruto nodded. Good. Now, does anyone know when the next natural portal will appear and where? The next will be in the ghost zone, sire. Sebastian answered, stuffing the box into his pocket. Naruto clapped his hands together. Wonderful. Simply marvelous. You once again live up to my expectations, Gigi. Now, is my carriage ready? The head general nodded. Naruto grinned, the glow in his eyes increasing. You've sparked my curiosity, something only done by few. Prepare yourself, Alpha, I'm coming for you. He laughed, causing all that heard it to shiver and hope that they weren't on their king's torture list. Danny shot out of bed, clutching his chest and breathing hard. He didn't know why, but he had suddenly felt an imminent doom course through his veins, sparking his adrenaline. He clutched the area above his normally slow-beating heart and felt it go miles a second. Something was wrong. Something was terribly wrong. He gulped, trying to calm his body down. He'd never felt this scared before, never. Not even when he was facing Dan Phantom, his future evil self that he vowed to never become. That caused his heart to speed up once again, as there was nothing he feared more than Dan. Since his ghost sense wasn't going off, then the ghost had to be far away. Who had an aura so great that it made him fear it by just the feel? He didn't want to know. Not even Dan or Pariah had an aura like that. Something was coming, and he was absolutely terrified of it. Whoa! Tucker and Sam gasped. They heard the tale Clockwork had told Danny. It was Saturday and they were hanging in Danny's room. He never came back to school and had feared the worst. They would have been mad at him, but the look on Mr. Lancer's face as he realized that Danny had vanished was worth it. Danny nodded solemnly, pinching the bridge of his nose as he tried to stay awake. Sure, he never got any sleep lately and had gotten used to it, but this time he spent most of the time worrying about what woke him up and exhausted himself doing so. Sam, being the ever-observant one she was, looked at him in concern. "Danny, are you all right?" Fine, just had a bad sleep is all." He responded streetly but yet not telling the whole truth. He didn't want to worry them even more. "The abyss? Whoa," Tucker repeated, looking excited about it but was still pale at the concept of there being Ghost Street. Wronger than both Pariah Dark and Dan Phantom. And one's coming here of all places. Well, I'm not exactly surprised per se, as all the ghosts seem to end up here at some time but one from this abyss. If he really does come, I don't think I'll be able to fight him," Danny whispered, looking out the window at the early morning sky. Sam's eyes softened at him. "Danny, I'll be honest and say I'm scared. I'm scared of what will happen when he comes. I'm scared of his power. I'm scared of what will happen when I fight him. I'm frightened of this whole thing in general." She placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You can do it. However, we'll need to up your training 100-fold and go for all hours of the day." "But what about the ghosts? What about Valerie? Can handle it," Tucker said, getting a look from Sam. "What? She's actually really good at her job. He's only bested by you, Danny. She can handle it for a few days. You need all your time, strength and resources for this thing." Danny relented with a sigh. It was true, Valerie was one of the best ghost hunters in Amity Park. His mother may be rivaling her, but the Red Huntress was the one that he can usually fight on equal ground with. When he was sick for a week, she handled herself fine and Amity was still standing. "What about Vlad, Valerie and your parents? What about them?" Danny asked, wrinkling his nose in disgust. At his archenemy's name spewing from Sam's mouth. "Well, they need to know. At least your parents do." Sam pushed. "Vlad might be able to help, but no way am I asking for his help," he growled. "Not in a billion years. Never. Not a chance." "Danny, that's childish. I'm sure even Vlad will want to rid Amity of this ghost. After all, world domination is his dream and he can't do that with an Abyssian here. After this is over we can go back to the way it was. But you need all the help you can get right now, Danny, you can't deny that." He sighed. Today just wasn't his day. "I'll tell him, but I'm not getting help from him." "You say that now, dude, but I have a feeling you will at some point," Tucker said. "What are you going to do about Valerie?" "I'm going to leave her a note," he said matter-of-factly. "That's it." Sam's dark eyebrow rose. "Yeah." Valerie sighed contentedly as she exited the shower. It felt good to be clean and not covered in sweat after a hunt. Her hunts had been rather successful lately. Sure, they weren't the ghost boy, but she was still at the top of her game. Vlad's betrayal hurt. Realizing that she was just doing his dirty work was hard on her. She also had questions. If that girl, Danielle, and Vlad were half ghosts or simply humans with ghost powers, then how much more of them were out there? Were they born that way or made such by an accident? Were hey people simply caught between life and death? Too many questions and no answers. This was one of the times she wished she didn't let Phantom go. As she walked into her room, she quickly spotted a folded piece of paper on her desk. Narrowing her eyes, she snatched it, tensing as if something would explode. When nothing happened, she opened it and skimmed it, her grip on it getting harder and harder as she read on. "Well, I can't say for sure that I like you, Phantom, but," she walked over to her wall and pulled off an ecto gun. "If this thing is really coming to Amity, I thank you for the heads up." Maddie was having a good day. Jack hadn't blown anything up yet. Danny had said he loved her, and Jazz had called her from college simply to hear her voice. She couldn't ask for anything better. Currently, she was baking Jack's favorite cookies in the oven while her husband was at the store buying parts for a new invention. Of course, when he wasn't looking, she'd fix it up so it wouldn't explode and put her kids in danger. He wouldn't notice, he never did. She enjoyed that childish smile that plastered itself onto his face every time one of his inventions works. Maddie. The echoing voice was familiar. She spun around, pulling out a Fenton bazooka and aiming it at the ghost boy, the enemy of Amity Park, with hatred in her glare. She watched as his hands flew up without a worried look on his face. Sure, there was concern and fear, but they were trace and she could tell that they weren't aimed at her. "Why are you here, ghost scum?" she hissed. "Have you come to destroy me while my husband is out?" Phantom shook his head. "No, I've come to warn you." Her eyebrows rose at that, surprise showing itself on her face. "Warn me? What kind of trick is this?" "This is no trick. I'm not going to be able to handle this by myself. Why approach me? Do you honestly think Jack would give me the time of day to even say hi to him?" He did have a point. He got her there. "Why do you need my help?" His face grew serious, fear shining in his eyes no matter how much he tried to hide it. That made her worry. The ghost boy never showed his fear. Sure, he was scared when they shot at them, but he never feared them. She relaxed but never stopped pointing her weapon at him. "Have you ever heard of the abyss?" "No," she decided to say. She knew the word, but she was pretty sure that what she had in mind wasn't what he was talking about. He sighed. "This is why I left the Red Huntress a note." She couldn't stop the snort of amusement at that one. Well, at least he came in person and didn't leave a piece of paper. The abyss is an area in the ghost zone where the weakest ghosts are stronger than Pariah Dark. His face showed seriousness, no joke twinkling in those emerald eyes. She felt herself pale at that, her eyes going wide in shock. Stronger than the Ghost King. Her eyes narrowed in anger. "What kind of sick joke is this?" she growled. "It's not a joke. The master of time, clockwork, told this to me himself. Even he can't see these people. The legendary ghost. All professional ghost hunters heard of him at some point in time." Fear welled in the pit of her stomach. "Why are you telling me? I'm going to need help. I needed the suit to defeat Pariah. Sorry for taking that, by the way, and still I had trouble defeating him. I don't know how strong this ghost is, but he's stronger than Pariah and—" "Wait, what do you mean by this ghost?" she asked quickly. "Oh, sorry about that. Clockwork said a ghost from the abyss was coming here. He had a single glimpse of the future, a picture. He wasn't sure, but he guessed that he was coming here. That's why I need your help." Her lips thinned. "So you're proposing a truce? Only when the ghost attacks. Otherwise you can shoot at me all you want." She pursed her lips, thinking. Finally, she lowered the gun, causing the ghost to relax. "Fine, I'll speak about it with Jack. However, this will not last." He smiled, silently thanking her. "I understand. Oh Daniel, what a lovely surprise," Vlad said, smiling as he stared down at Danny in the doorway to his mayor mansion. "Have you finally decided to renounce your fool of a father and join me?" Danny sneered. "No way in hell, Plasmius. Really? That's too bad." He stepped aside. "Do come in though. I don't trust walking into your home, Vlad. I'm fine where I am." "You really are stubborn. Just like your mother." Vlad smiled at the mention of her while Danny scowled. "I'm not here to talk, Vlad." "Are you sure? You are speaking to me right now." Vlad smirked. Danny felt an embarrassed blush leaking onto his face at that. "Don't be a smart ass. I came here because it's important." Vlad blinked at that. "You never come to me. If it was my choice I wouldn't be here, but Sam," he sighed. She put up an argument. "Ah, that Manson girl. She hates me just as much as you. Why'd she feel the need to have you come to me? I'm sure you in your infinite wisdom will know what I'm talking about." Danny rolled his eyes at that before his face hardened. "Clockwork came to me and said something troublesome. I'm not sure I can handle it on my own." Vlad's eyes narrowed. "What is it, little badger? What did he tell you?" "Someone from the abyss is headed towards Amity Park." He watched Vlad pale. If the situation wasn't dire he'd had laughed, but he'd done tea. He same thing, so he couldn't really say anything about it. Are you sure? Almost positive. Well then, I'll need to prepare. I don't like unemployed ghosts running around after all. Don't lie. Yo, you just don't want any competition in world domination. Danny growled. Vlad smirked down at the boy. Very true. My dear boy, very true indeed. The box ghost mumbled under his breath as he flew in a random direction. His face looking down. Once again he lost to the ghost boy who destroyed his boxes and bubble wrap of doom. He didn't understand how he was always captured so easily, so quickly. Phantom was so powerful it wasn't fair. Looking up, he stopped and his eyes widened as his blue skin paled. He didn't think he floated this far. He should seriously watch where he's flying from now on. Before him was a wall of angrily swirling green, black and red with black woven into them. It gave off a feeling of, touch me and you die, and the common, enter at your own risk, warning. He gulped, knowing immediately what this was, and started to float backwards. He jumped when the swirling started to stop in an area. Suddenly, a carriage came crashing through the barrier and sending the colors spiraling everywhere around it. He stood paralyzed with fear in what he saw. If he was still alive and had bodily functions, he was sure he would have wet himself out of pure fear. The carriage was black, with thorns sticking out of the wheels and corners. The horses resembled Fright Nights, only these ones were more bony and dead looking, as if someone just dug them out of a grave and put them to work. Their wings looking like nothing but thin flesh. But the scariest thing of all was the driver. He was a being covered in a large cloak, a skull mask on the side of his covered head, and a deadly scythe strapped to his back. The only thing he could think of was the Grim Reaper. To stood still, as it was the only thing he could do, as the carriage passed him without so much as a glacé or acknowledgement. Finally, as it became smaller and smaller in his vision, he collapsed and fell down until he landed onto a piece of floating ground. He couldn't believe it. First off, he survived and was proud of himself, but then the implication of this hit him like a ton of bricks. The box ghost may be stupid at times, but he has his moments, especially ones like these. He realized that a ghost, or than one of you, count the driver and those inside the carriage, from the abyss were here, in the zone, and possibly heading to the living world. He's going to be hiding in his realm for a long time. But first, he had to warn everybody. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.